Jennifer Lont. I'm a Homeworks by Precept consultant, and today I am here to talk with you about how to teach science and heritage studies to your advanced student. One of the biggest things in teaching the content areas is teaching your child to love learning. And I do think if you can teach your child to love reading, it really helps because there's so much information in textbooks that he will need to read and digest. But even beyond that, we need to teach them to ask questions and reach for answers. So I started early on with my two boys by collecting lots of different books. We had stories and folktales and things like that, but we also collected nonfiction books, things about volcanoes or sharks, or just anything that I could find at yard sales that would be interesting to my boys or that I knew that they hadn't learned about yet. So we read about spiders and snakes and all kinds of things. And my boys learned that those types of books are interesting, and they would give them this hunger for learning. They just love to learn new things each day. Those books can be helpful as you teach through the elementary science curriculum or the heritage studies curriculum. We have things about the Statue of Liberty and the White House and different battles or different time periods or different people groups. So whenever I would be looking for a book, I had a hard time finding it because we had so many books in the house. So I found an idea on Pinterest that's really been helpful to me. You color code your books based on what subject they are. So in our house, all of the history books have a little bit of yellow duct tape right on the bottom of the spine. And all of the science have a little bit of orange, just because that's the color that I had. So whenever I'm looking for a particular book, say about volcanoes or the skeleton, then I can go to my shelf, I can look for the orange books, and I can find it more quickly. Not only did we read nonfiction books, but we also read historical fiction. So we learned about different time periods and imagined ourselves being there. And that's another way that you can get your kids interested in history. One other type of book that I found that I wasn't expecting to find was through our local library. We found a book that was full of photos of things that are on display in the Civil War exhibit in the Smithsonian Institution. My second son loves the Civil War, so it's really neat to be able to get a book, and even if you can't go to the museum, you can look through page by page and see all the different uniforms and weapons and things that are left from the Civil War that are on display in our nation's capital. Let's go back to the idea of teaching your child to ask questions and reach for answers. If your child is learning something new and has a question and asks you, I would encourage you to just answer the question. Don't send him away and tell him to look it up himself. He will learn that you don't want to answer questions if you do that. But if you answer his question, then he will ask more questions and you will have more and more discussion and learning going on between the two of you. But a lot of times when my boys ask me questions, I don't know the answers, and that's why I'm glad that we have smartphones with the internet now. So when my child has never heard of a particular animal, or there's a historical event that we want to look up, you can type in the keyword and then put in the word images as well. That way, your search results will be full of images of that kind of animal or of that particular event. So try it out. We just learned this year about the vinegaroon. It's spelled like vinegar, Vinegaroon. Take a look and see what you can find on the internet for that one. YouTube is another valuable resource for teaching science and history. So if you're teaching about volcanoes, don't just talk about the different kinds of volcanoes and the different ways they erupt. Get some video. Show your kids the videos of them erupting. Some will just have lava creeping out, some will have these huge explosions, and those can add a lot to your lessons and your child's understanding and his motivation and excitement about the subject that you're learning. Sometimes in my boys' lessons there is something that's mentioned and they want to learn more about it. So rather than just looking up an image, I'll have my child make a note, and then it reminds him that he wants to tell his dad that they can look that subject up on YouTube that evening. And that's a great way for my husband to stay involved and to talk with the boys about what they're learning too. So recently this year, my battle-loving son wanted to look up missiles from the Cold War. And so he and his dad saw those videos together. And my science guy wanted to understand the Coriolis effect. He knew what the book said, he understood what the book said, but he wanted to know more about how it worked and why it worked. And so they watched some videos on YouTube. Those kinds of things can help your kids dig deeper and go wider with what is already in the curriculum. Another thing that you can look for is virtual field trips. I think we all know about those now because we've been staying at home, but there's some great ones out there. Your kids can go to Mount Vernon and look around Mount Vernon, or they can go to Versailles. So there are lots of options available with technology. We started to transition to online video courses whenever my older son was going into junior high. And I honestly didn't know if I was going to like the video lessons or not. I wondered if my son needed them because he was good at reading the text, doing the work, and getting good grades. But they have added so much to my boys' school experiences. They add in all those images and video clips and field trips and science lab demonstrations and links to online resources like Google Earth and just so many different things. There are funny clips and so many things to keep my kids growing and interested. In fact, they get so interested that we have "Hey Mom" moments sometimes. So I didn't want to be interrupted during the school day when we were all working. So sometimes we save those "Hey Mom" moments for lunch so that they can tell me about this new fact or this really exciting thing or something that they'd never thought of before that was brought up in their lesson. You also want to make your lessons as hands-on as possible. And in science, that means don't just watch the labs. If you have the materials around your house, get your children to do some labs. Whenever they're in junior high and high school, they actually have kits that you can buy. Here's the physical science kit, and it's a box, and it's full of things that your child will need in order to do the labs. So there are things in here like measurement equipment and spring scales and thermometers and safety equipment, and there are chemicals, and there are there's a little car that's prepared. There's a voltage meter and a little digital scale, just all kinds of things. The box is full. It's even got things like plastic cups that you will need, so that it should make it easier for you to get some of these labs done. Now, you don't have to do every single lab, but 20% of your coursework should be lab work. If you don't do labs, then you really can't count your high school class as, say, biology. You would need to mark it as survey of biology on the transcript. So if you get one of these kits, or if you do it another way, make sure you're doing some labs. They will help your child either dig deeper and focus on a specific subject or topic or thought, or they will help your child explore new possibilities or new thoughts within that field of science. These kits, some of them are reusable. The physical science and the physics kits can be used for 3 children, so they've got enough supplies in them for 3 uses. And then biology and chemistry you can reuse, but you'll need to buy a refill kit if you buy one of these Logos science kits. And then you can reinforce what your child is learning in lots of other hands-on ways. I even have a list here today to help me remember all of the things I wanted to mention because there are so many good ideas. The textbooks are full of good ideas, and I found lots of good things on Pinterest. And once you pin one thing, they will start feeding you more like it. So you can start building your files. And I would recommend filing them by school subject. And then within that subject, you can now put folders. So if you put something in for science, then you could file it under animals or earth and space or whatever the category is. So do art. Art can help you almost play as you think through what you've learned in class that day. So whether you are doing something about space, or you're doing some kind of a silhouette for history, or you're doing an animal painting, or whatever it is, it can reinforce while you're playing and just continue to feed that love of learning. One of the projects that I found on Pinterest that we loved was making a veggie skeleton. And so as we cut up veggies, we thought about, well, what would make the best ribs? And we did bell pepper slices for the ribs. And how are we going to make the backbone? So we might slice cucumber or something for that, and use carrots for different bones. And then as we ate them, then we could talk about, I want that humerus. Can you make sure I get that humerus? Or I want to eat that patella, that cherry tomato, or whatever we had used. So that was lots of fun. We also give our boys toys and games that help them to learn, and our families do too. So they have had lots of puzzles, like about space and ocean and maps and presidents and just different school topics, so that they could have fun doing a puzzle while they are reviewing those facts or that information. We have lots and lots of Legos. In fact, I should probably do a whole video post about those. And building toys. We have magnetic toys and robotics and snap circuits. These are neat. If you've not seen them before, you can get these sets, and they have instructions and different projects inside, so your kids can build circuits and study electronics. Then we do field trips to zoos and museums and historical villages and science center, and we always talk about what we've learned in school while we're there, and when we come home and we're doing school, we talk about what we experienced at the field trip when we're at home. We've also done notebooking, especially whenever I was doing parent-led with one of my sons. I just wanted him to get used to taking notes, but we did it in a fun way. We would do drawings and do little visuals and diagrams and help him organize the information in a little notebook. We have also built models. This is something that is in the BJU Press homeschool curriculum, and it's really neat. I think it was maybe last year, 4th grade, my son had to build a model of the eye, and this is what he built. And I helped him find some of the pieces. So we had a little plastic container, and that was the shape of the eyeball. And then we had this white, like a little ketchup cup or something that was new, so we put that on there for the white of your eye. And then inside, you can't see it, on behind this iris there is a little glass pebble. That's the lens, and the pupil had to be cut out, of course, because it's just the hole in the eye. And then we have saran wrap over the whole thing because that is the cornea. And then this pink balloon at the back is the retina, and then we've got the optic nerve. So these things are fun, where your kids can find objects around the house to build a model of something. My son also built this lung this year in 5th grade science, and the Play-Doh on the top has dried up, so it doesn't work so well anymore. But this balloon on the bottom, let's see if I seal it maybe. This balloon on the bottom is like your diaphragm, and it shows how even though the diaphragm is not connected to your lung, which is this balloon, it increases the space inside your lungs, which allows, or inside your chest cavity, which allows your lungs to expand. So we've done those kind of models with just found items around the home. We have done food models making jello and making a model of your blood by putting in bananas and strawberries for the white blood cells and red blood cells. So our boys work in our garden. They work getting weeds out and breaking up the ground. They work, they plant the garden sometimes and get to help me choose vegetables sometimes. They have grown really huge things like sunflowers and big pumpkins, and we've tried watermelon, and they've done tiny little things like green beans where they have to pick bean after bean after bean, and they have watered the garden faithfully. So experiences like that really help them whenever you're studying in school, and maybe the lesson is about how a fruit develops, and we can look at our vegetables in the garden, and we've got experience that we can think back on that helps us understand the textbooks. Sometimes my husband teaches the boys how to make things, and so they get not only his knowledge and experience, but they get to bring to it everything they've learned in school and do something really hands-on, whether it's building a birdhouse or working on their treehouse together. We also bought the rock collection from BJU Press Homeschool. It's got 50 different specimens, and they are listed here, and there is a book that comes with it that tells you more about them. But take a look at this. You've got 50 different minerals and rocks and gemstones, rough gemstones, and it's just so neat as your child is going through that particular section in science where he can pick up the pumice or the quartz or the iron pyrite or whatever it is that the teacher is talking about, and see it and look at it. And so that's been really neat. There's also a fossil collection, and we don't have it yet. It's on our wish list. So those are some things that are helpful as well for science. For 7th grade life science, there is an insect collection that they're supposed to do. And I really wasn't excited about having dead bugs in my house, but I like to take pictures, and my son does too. So what we did is we went outside the whole summer before, and we just tried to get pictures of different insects, and that was really fun. And then my son was able to take those pictures and classify them, and I helped him find the names of the insects on the internet, and then he made an album, and it showcases not only what he learned about the insects, but his photography as well. When we studied Newton's laws of motion, I took my boys outside to the van. We have a long driveway, and I told the boys to get in the van and crouch down in the back of the van. And then I would drive forward. You have to do this slowly so no one gets hurt, but I would drive forward and then step on the brake. And of course, there was a reaction that happened. And then I also backed up the van and stepped on the brake. And then they found out firsthand what happened when you do that. And they laughed so much. They had so much fun. It was just one of those homeschool moments where you just really enjoy learning together. And then we came back inside the house. And as we went through the lesson, we went through the text. Now they really understood Newton's laws of motion. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. And they had firsthand experience, firsthand knowledge of that, and they had learned it in such a memorable and fun way. So those are the kinds of things that will stick with them for a long time. One final thought about making science and history hands-on is connect with people. For history, you can interview grandparents. You can interview military, people who have served our country. You can interview people who lived through a particular era. You can even do this on Facebook. You can have your child survey what people were doing whenever the first man landed on the moon. Or for science, when we were studying genetics, we asked people to tell us whether they had a widow's peak, if their hairline came down in the top, or if they had a hitchhiker's thumb, if their thumb was straight, like mine, or if it really curves backwards. And those are genetic things. So those are things that can help your child just really take an interest and love learning and go beyond what's in the textbook. You can also ask if you know someone who works in a particular field that would be helpful. Ask if your child can visit them at work. We have a man in our church who works in a genetics lab, and my son thought he wanted to be a geneticist whenever he read that section of life science. So he agreed and got permission for my son to come and visit him at work sometime. So we're going to do that, and not only will that help my son learn, it will help him find out if maybe that's a possibility for how God wants to use him in the future. It's also something that you can put on your child's high school transcript. Include those experiences that show that your child has a rich and thorough and great education. Teach your child that all the school subjects work together, that we learn language arts like reading so that we can take in information, and we learn spelling and grammar so that we can share information with others and do it well and effectively. Teach them that they will be using math and science, and that this just all comes together. Teach your child how to write in the different content areas. Often in BJU Press Homeschool, there will be writing assignments in many different subjects. And those are important because your child needs to not just take in information, but he needs to be able to express what he's learned. So teach your child to write a good essay. Teach him to turn the question into his topic sentence and then support it with facts and details. So everything we learn in school comes together to give us the skills that we need in order to be successful adults who can be useful. Now, if you have packed in extra activities and field trips and labs, you may not be able to finish all of the lesson plans that come with our curriculum, and that's okay. But it is good if you're able to get through some more of it so that you can be familiar with that content before you move on to the next grade. So I got this tip from one of our video course teachers. She said that whenever you have just a couple chapters left in the content areas in science and in history, what you can do is go straight to the test. Give your child the test and give him his book and tell him to go on a scavenger hunt and find the answers. You don't even need to grade this, but what it will do is it will help him to go through all the most important information and at least familiarize himself with it before he moves on. No one is able to do it all. I know I've given you a lot of different ideas, but I don't do all of these things all the time. I don't do every lab, I don't do every writing assignment, and I don't do every Pinterest idea, no matter how cute and educational it is. Just be a learner and encourage your kids to be learners, and then as you're able to, add in some of these hands-on things, some of these things that are fun and motivational and will help your child go beyond the textbook. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.